welcome to Area Study 2. Yay! Finally, we're introducing ourselves to Area Study 2. Now, our first topic is all about these things called signaling molecules and how our cells kind of talk to each other. So let's get started. Here's our first point from the study design. So we talk about the sources and the mode of transmission of various signaling molecules to their target cell, and that's what I'm going to start with in this first video. And then we talk about 5 different examples of signaling molecules. We talk about plant and animal hormones, we talk about neurotransmitters, and we talk about cytokines and pheromones. All right, and they will each be small videos on their own so that you can just go back and watch whichever one you need to. But to begin with, we need to think about what is cell signaling. So cell signaling is just essentially cells communicating with each other. Think about it. If cells can't talk to each other, then every one of them just kind of sits on their own and does their own thing and produces their own products. And that's not very efficient. It's kind of like you guys being at home and just working completely independently and never talking to anyone else. You're probably recreating a whole bunch of work that no one needs you to do, and you're not very efficient. So in order to make your whole body or a whole organism, because it's not just humans, it's animals, it's plants, it's bacteria even though they're a little bit, no, not bacteria, but fungi, anything that's multicellular needs to be able to communicate within its cells to make sure that everything works efficiently. So that kind of brings us to the why. Now I've got a few interesting pictures here to show you. The first picture is showing you a whole bunch of signals. So this one over here is showing us a whole bunch of signals. You can see that there's things coming in the protein channels. That red is not a good color. There's things coming in the protein channels over here. They are sending signals right into the nucleus. We've got other things that are sending cells from the inside of the membrane through to the nucleus. We've got things sending stuff out of the nucleus, out of the cell via protein export. So you can see there's lots and lots of communication and signals that are passing within a cell that are happening. This second picture is so cool. So this second picture is actually showing you a bit of a representation of what the inside of a cell actually looks like if you could see it. So we always draw the cytoplasm as being empty, like there's nothing in it. But this picture in the middle here, this is showing us the inside of a cell. Sorry. It's so full, yeah? And it's amazing to think that those molecules can kind of just keep bumping into each other and making it. The third one is a bit of an indication of where we're going to be heading with cell signaling. So this has got to do with bad guys. Yeah, so these are, that's a wrong color. These are things like bacteria, things like viruses. All of those are the things that we're going to be talking about for the majority of this unit after we do our initial bit on cell signaling. So how does our body respond to foreign pathogens and foreign invaders? So to begin with, we're going to have to go through the modes of transmission, the different ways that cells can communicate. So this is one of the parts of the dot point, and there are 3 words that we need to take home. So these are in your notes on page 2. You can see that the first type of signaling is autocrine signaling or autocrine signaling. It doesn't matter how you say it, so long as you can remember how to spell it and what it is. So auto means self, and the crine is the signaling part. So the endocrine system, which I'll get to in a bit, has got that crine or that crin in it, and that's got to do with signaling and messages being sent. So autocrine is when the cell is going to release a signal. Yeah, it's going to release a signal. That's the signal here, this blue thing, this red thing, sorry, and it's going to target itself. Okay, so these are cells that release a signal and it comes back to itself and targets it. And we'll talk about which types of molecules do that. The next type of transmission is paracrine. So para means part or close or very similar, and this has got to do with a nearby cell. So the signaling cell releases its little signaling molecules and it targets a cell that's quite close to it. So in particular, if you've done psychology, this would be your neurotransmitters. And we'll come back to that anyway, so don't stress too much about examples at this stage. The last one is the endocrine signaling. So this happens a lot in animals. We get a lot of endocrine signaling. Now the endo prefix, I didn't prepare myself well enough for this one. The endo prefix, let's just have a look at the etymology of endo just so I get it right. Oh, I went the wrong keyboard. So look at the etymology. So do you remember that I talked about the etymology of words, and that's where they come from? So endo, meaning within. So this is within an organism, but it's not necessarily within a cell. And I'm just going to look up the etymology of crine while we're here, or crine. Now, let's see if I can get it better with this one. So the crine bit means sift. It doesn't, so it's kind of within an organism. So it's about distinguishing where those molecules are going to go. But essentially we've got these three words. We've got autocrine, targeting yourself, paracrine, targeting a nearby cell, and endocrine, targeting a cell that's a bit further away, and usually you have to use the bloodstream. Yeah, so the best example of these are hormones in animals. Animal hormones. Okay. This next part of your notes, I'm just going to go through really quickly. We will come back to it multiple times. Yeah, so this is the nature of signaling molecules. Now, we've used these two words before. We've used them back when we talked about the cell membrane, and this is where it comes back into play. And we're going to talk about the things that are able to get through. So we've already discussed this, but we're now going to bring it in and make sure that it links to this topic. So if a molecule is hydrophilic, that means it's soluble in water, and it also means it's polar. We've talked about these words, and the last word that we're going to link to it is that it's peptide based. Now, what do we know about things that are hydrophilic and peptide based? Can they get in or out of the nucleus? Sorry, in or out of the cell by simple diffusion? So no simple diffusion here with the hydrophilic molecules. So we know that they can't do that. The hydrophobic molecules, these are our lipid-based or fat-based molecules. These ones are insoluble in water. These ones can diffuse into the cell because they can pass through those hydrophobic tails in the cell membrane. So the next video is going to go through the different types. I'm just going to go through one little thing going through the types of signaling molecules. There are 5 we need to know, and then there'll be 5 little videos that go through each type. So the first one is animal hormones. So I'll spend quite a bit of time going through those because they're the ones that we've probably heard of before and that are easy to deal with. The next one are the plant hormones. Now, you don't need to know any specific examples of these, but I will go through a couple because they often give you a specific example in the question. So the more that I can expose you to, the better you'll be at the end. Next one are neurotransmitters. If you've done psych, this is the same. Okay, so this is the same as what you learn in psychology. And I'll go briefly through neuron structure and how neurotransmitters work, but you don't need to remember how the neurotransmitters are talking to, the neuron structure or anything very specific about the action of neurotransmitters. We talk about cytokines briefly now and then a lot when we do the immune system. And the last one are the pheromones. Now, these are really easy to remember. And often the questions on these are pretty simple on the exam. They don't ask very difficult questions about pheromones. And so there are your 5 groups of signaling molecules.